Greetings, Poe fans. Welcome to another edition of Poe UnPlugged. I am Carmen Bolden.
And I am Jeannie Smith, and we are
The Poetastic Two.
Come zoom with us into the Unbook Club dedicated to the works of Mr. Edgar Allan Poe.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Poe UnPlugged. And we are so excited. We have, one new person, and we have several of our regular people back with us, and our special guest, Sharon Pica. Pica. Did I say it right?
I say Pica.
Pica, that's right. I always want to say it wrong. I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine.
Yes, and so we're glad to have Sharon with us. And so, Rachel, do you want to introduce yourself really quickly?
Hi, I'm Rachel. Hello, Sharon. I saw her last week at her book release party.
Oh, it's Rachel. Hey.
Hey. I've been a Poe fan since junior high, to the annoyance of most people I know.
Well, we're glad you're with us, and we have Dr. Jeff and Micah and Will, Holly, Virginia, and Keith. They're our regular crew that joins us, and again, Leila couldn't make it tonight, but she's definitely going to be back next month. So, Sharon, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your new book before we get started talking about the premature burial?
Sure. Hi, I'm Sharon Pica. I'm a professor of English. I also have a graduate program under my belt in public history. So I focus on cemeteries for most of my research now. It was a little bit different when I started in academia, but I'm starting my 18th year at Gallaudet in Washington, D.C. And my book is The Soul. Every time I have to look at the title because I feel like I'm going to say it wrong. It's The Souls Close to Edgar Allan Poe, Graves of His Family, Friends, and Foes. And the idea is, instead of just writing a biography about Poe, I really just wanted to take myself on a grand tour of the different cemeteries and find the people that knew him, that he was acquainted with during his lifetime. And I wanted to get to know them in hopes that I could have a fuller understanding of this writer that I like so much, and all of his quirky little ways. And it's been a lot of fun.
Yes, and the book is fantastic. Jeannie and I both read it, and we did an interview with Sharon, and so you can catch that on our regular podcast episodes. And I know Virginia did an interview on Beyond the Oblong Box, and I've listened to that interview, and it's awesome as well. And they were in Westminster Burial Ground, so that was really cool.
That was an episode that I was like, dear God, please let all this work, because everything was working against me that day.
Yes.
Technology and I really aren't friends.
Yeah, that's kind of a theme for tonight, is technology issues.
Yep.
But how about we were in the rain?
Yeah, we were in the rain, and that
in
was
a cemetery.
Cool. In a cemetery. And I still
with dead people.
Yeah.
The only thing I was missing were you two, Carmen and Jeannie. I was
yes.
Dang it. Where's he here with me?
When I listened to it, I was like, oh, I wish I was there, because I was listening to it on my way to work one morning, and I was like, oh, this is so awesome.
I don't know if you'd want me in a cemetery with you, because I just giggle and I just have a good old time, because I grew up just hanging out in teenage years in the cemeteries drinking. So, I got some old friends hanging out in the cemetery. So.
Well, I definitely wouldn't want to go with you to a cemetery back home, because they might come out and say, I don't know, might zombie
and say hi.
Yes, that's true.
Family would come out and say, let's have a party.
Yes. Okay, so we have read The Premature Burial, and we want to hear everybody's thoughts on this story. We thought it would be very appropriate for having Sharon on as our guest. Will says, I went to my local cemetery at night once, and as I walked Yeah, my neck hurts something fierce. Oh wow.
Oh.
Walked home, that's supposed to be.
Oh, walked out. Okay, yeah.
No.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Did you tick somebody off before you walked in?
No, I just walked in.
Huh?
Oh
Well, somebody must have not had a good night. I'm just.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
anybody want to start the discussion about what your thoughts were on premature burial?
It scared me.
Did it?
Well, I have this thing. I won't get on an elevator if it's more than 6 people. I will take the stairs. And then, at the beginning, I was reading about all these cases, and I'm like, well, that's creepy. That's horrible. And then the one about the woman, hanging there from whatever in the crypt, and her husband found her. I was like, oh. And the tension just started building up in the back of my neck as I'm reading this. And then poor man's buried, the narrator. But of course, I was just like, oh, I was horrified. And then, in the Edgar Allan Poe book I've got, there was a diagram of the coffin and that he was in, and the direction he had to go to get out. But I put it down, at one point, and got up and walked around the room for a few minutes, and my heart was beating kind of fast, and I was breathing kind of heavy, and I'm like, oh, I hadn't gotten to the end yet, so I just reached the point where I'm like, oh no, this is what's going to happen. I can't go another page further. I'm not about to read about a dead man in the cemetery.
Yeah, Sharon, I liked your comment that, tells about story or says don't, it's horrifying and then tells about them.
Well, that fits with Edgar Allan Poe.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yes, it
Yeah.
does.
And I'm right up there with Keith because, number one, anyone who suffers claustrophobia cannot read this story. Because
I can see that.
And it's
yeah.
not just claustrophobia. It is, number one, just having that fear of not being able to tell anyone that, the vegetative states, the catatonia, and even back then, they were first discovering curare and what it could do and how it can completely paralyze a person. It's called the waking death for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
So, and back then they didn't have a lot of the medical technology, and even if the medical technology, the body could completely shut down, but the brain's still working. And we even have people today in hospitals that are in vegetative states that can still have brain function, but nothing else.
Right. Yeah. I did, as I was reading, I would when I'd get some kind of thought about something, I would do a little research back and forth. And, especially with the whole theory of, are they really dead or are they not? Because they didn't have anything to test brainwave functioning. Will says, I took an anthropology class years ago, and there was a chapter on the origin of, I think it was voodoo. The chat thing went away.
Right.
Yeah. I bet that was fascinating.
Oh yeah. You guys can't read that?
Oh, I did, but it kind of disappeared, and my bar on the bottom is not cooperating for me to get rid of it right now. So I'm having a hard time.
Yeah, it just talked about how the zombies and the voodoo folklore were inspired by people who were thought to have been dead. And there was one story about a woman whose brother had been dead for 20 years, and yet there he was walking the streets, and she's like, I thought you were dead. And it turned out that he had been heavily drugged to the point where he looked dead, and this is a common practice back then. So I wouldn't be surprised if Edgar Allan Poe was inspired by that whole culture to write that story.
Oh, yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and it developed in the Haitian after the whole Haitian rebellion, and the Haitian slaves took over, and then they created the voodoo and the hoodoo, all that, because there's been a lot of episodes. I know Miami Vice was one that did an episode where, why can't I think of the priest now? I can't think of his name.
I have no idea. I didn't watch Miami Vice.
Yeah. It goes along with it that they came over and they literally turn people into zombies, and they are using these type of plants and stuff like that, and they're not really zombies, they're just turned into where they've
I
gave him some high drug
I
anesthesia.
also seriously thought when you said voodoo, hoodoo, I thought you're going to start singing witchcraft.
Well,
So-
you know the difference, don't you? Voodoo translates to the spirit of God, and hoodoo is the other.
Right, exactly.
So one's the dark, one's the
Yeah.
light. So
Micah said, I once had to audition for a play. The director didn't give me any lines. Instead, she asked me to imagine I woke up in my own coffin. I remembered Poe's story, tried to recreate it as best as I could. I got the part. Oh, wow.
nice.
Ooh,
Yes, but very creepy.
Well,
that's
yeah.
creepy.
I don't know if you all have it, but around here during Halloween, there's actually a haunt group, and it's actually religious based, where you can lie in a casket
Ah,
and it simulates you kind of going into the ground. And then apparently when you're there for up to 5 minutes or something, it will start talking to you scripture. And my
Wow.
friend, but I'm like completely claustrophobic when it comes to anything like that. The elevator comment, I'm with you on that. And I'm even going to be cremated just to make sure that when I'm in the ground, I'm ashes. So
that's the direction. That's the direction I'm going, because I just, the idea of being put in a box in the ground, I hyperventilated.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Yeah.
I even told Carmen the other day we were talking about this. I think what we're talking about this already.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, we were talking about our funerals and she was talking about she was going to get cremated and scattered around, and I said I'm going to have a Viking burial.
hey,
Just throw
I
my
can see
butt
that.
in a canoe or something out in the lake.
I
and
want to
set
shoot
me
the
on
arrow
fire.
with the fire.
Exactly. You set me on fire and let me go.
All right, let's get back to the.
So this is gonna sound crazy.
No, go ahead.
I actually read. Okay, sorry. My saying my internet is. I don't know if you guys can hear me because we're having storms here in New Jersey, but
Okay.
I actually read Fire Story as very optimistic. And I say this, I kind of felt this was one of his happier kind of stories, is because you have a guy, his very fear, he has a dream of it, and he basically gets to like live, his word, and he comes down and he's like, if you get too caught up in death, you forget to live. And at the end
Yeah.
of the story, he goes and he finally leaves fear behind. He's able to live his life. So I kind of, as like a lesson, like, you know what, if we keep like, and if you get caught up in your own fear, they may be, for this particular narrator, it was being buried alive. But if you get caught up in that, then you're never able to move on and live, enjoy your life. So for me, even though it had, even like that flashback to like his stories with the lovers that were reunited, it was like a positive thing for me. I kind of thought it was like super romantic.
Yeah, it was.
So for me, it was optimistic, and I kind of like for me.
Yeah, no,
I'm weird.
I mean, Holly, it really did have a happy ending because, the way Poe wrote it with all the suspense, it really did feel like he was going to be dead. And then all of a sudden they're shaking him to wake him up, and he was alive and dreaming. And I think, I was going to say, if you look into the deep psychology of this, with obsessive behaviors and compulsive behaviors, you can get too entrenched in things to where you forget everything else except what you're focused on. And the narrators seem to be that way, definitely.
Well, it definitely fits with Poe's normal story arcs. That it doesn't matter whether it's human or if it's animal. It always has some kind of death related, something trapped, and then at the end, something actually is alive, and somebody's gone nuts. So hey,
yeah,
it's Poe.
I mean, I'm
Well,
glad
and-
the guy lived. I mean, I was happy when I got to the ending and he was alive and he went on to live his life, and the illness just, got away from him because, his mind basically drove him to that point because of his fear of death.
Yeah.
But it was the build up to it that is getting me.
Yeah. One thing that I thought was really interesting too, when he talks about the narrator, creating the vault with the securities, making sure that he could, get out and everything. And I did some research, and so they really did make safety, coffins. There's Jeannie. Safety coffins to ensure people, with, we've I think referenced this in other stories with, Saved by the Bell, that originated. Oh, thank you, Sharon. Back from that time frame, but the phrase itself actually wasn't written down until 1883 for a boxing reference. It kind of morphed into something else, and I found it really interesting because I found several articles that people were arguing over where did that phrase start from. And so anybody have thoughts on that or find information about that?
Well, I had come across something on the internet about they had put the bells at the cemetery and they would leave the family sitting there to see if the loved one was still alive, and the loved one would ring the bell and then he'd go get help and they'd unbury whoever the person was, if they had young or if it was, and I thought, well, that's creepy. But I mean, but I thought, well, if the poor person had been buried alive, I'd be ringing the heck out of that bell too to get someone to pay attention to me. And but I did watch Premature Burial with Raymond Land. Of course, it took a totally different spin on the story than what I read. But I mean, even when he was put in the coffin, I was like tensing up on the couch, like I can't. Oh no, don't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I watched The Premature Burial last week too. One of Roger Corman's Poe movies, the one that does not star Vincent Price. Raymond Land is the star, and there's a long scene in which he demonstrates all of the features of his mausoleum. And that reminded me of the storyline on Dark Shadows, where the Joan Bennett character becomes obsessed with death and being buried alive, and she has a mausoleum made for her with a bell. And true enough, she is buried prematurely and wakes up and rings the bell.
Yeah, Jeff, that is where I'm at watching Dark Shadows right now. And I thought the same thing. I actually wrote a note down and I was like, this is Dark Shadows.
Yes.
They took this from Poe.
Right.
I thought that was really cool.
I thought that the way this story begins, it is nonfiction. It almost could have been one of his articles in a magazine. And then halfway through, it becomes a fiction short story when he puts himself into these situations and tells us what happened on the ship. And I figured from a very literal writer's standpoint that he would be alive at the end. Otherwise, he could not have written the story.
Yeah, that's very true.
Although William Wilson.
Yes, yeah. Any writer can, write in an omniscient way or from beyond the grave, or the shock ending is I'm writing it after I'm dead.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And then Will had said, if you ain't busy living, you're busy dying, Poe the motivational speaker. And then he says, I think that if I was in that situation, I would be way too terrified to even know there was a bell there, and I'd probably die in my burial spot. That could, I'm sure that possibly happened to some people just because of the shock of terror that, what if you can't move your arm because of how you're laying in the coffin?
Yeah, they died of heart attacks. Because that's one of the things that they found, that those that were buried alive that were unable to pull the bell and the thing, most of the time when they woke up, they would die from the sheer shock and the terror of being buried alive.
Yeah.
That's what most people don't understand, that you can die from being scared to death.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But there was a movie, The Tingler, that proved it.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. One thing that I loved is in my book, let's see. One of the things he said, in the year 1810, a case of living inhumation happened in France, attended with circumstances which go far to warrant the assertion that truth is indeed stranger than fiction. And so, that was from Lord Byron in 1823 and Don Juan. And his quote was, "'Tis strange, but true. For truth is always strange, stranger than fiction." And so I loved that, Poe loved Byron and he included this kind of as an homage to him. And so when I read that, I was just like, oh, this is awesome. But truth is stranger than fiction. And it's almost hard to believe, almost surrealistic, that people could actually be buried alive on accident. You think of the stories that it's on purpose. In the movie, there was some of those purposes, but that for the accidental death, it's horrific to think about.
I dropped some pictures in the chat. I'm not sure if people can see them.
Yeah, I think everybody should be able to. I looked at them. Sharon, do you want to share?
Yeah, this is just in Bonaventure. So I'm always curious about this stuff, but Bonaventure has one of that I know of, one of the only bells that was by this Charles F. Mills. And so there's the bell sticking up to the I guess when you're looking at it, to the left of the vault. And he apparently paid people to be kind of close to his grave at night. Like he had security for several weeks or a month. I can't remember how long they said, but they wanted to make sure that if he did ring the bell, somebody would be there to hear it, because he's very far away from the entrance.
Mhm.
That's always my question, is like, you not only do you have to have the bell, but you have to have someone who happens to be in the cemetery at the very moment and can hear it. But
Yeah.
I know usually after the death and the burial, the family would do a 24-hour watch for 3 days. There was always a family member sitting beside the grave and then after 72 hours, then they would be like, it's done, and they would go home.
Yeah.
But they would sit there 24/7, basically 24/3.
Yeah, that's just, it's so weird to think about. And then Micah said, truth is stranger than fiction, another idea borrowed by Arthur Conan Doyle for Sherlock Holmes. Yes, absolutely. All right, other thoughts?
Can we just talk about some of the examples, like in the beginning?
Yeah.
Talking about the people who were buried alive.
Absolutely.
That one with the woman who was in the family vault, and then the husband comes in, and somehow she's like fallen and got her, garment tangled up, and then now she's this hanging corpse or skeleton. It's just like, that's so horrific. And if you were reading this, at the time, like, it's not necessary. I mean, you might say, oh, this is fiction. Oh, but it does sound a lot like, based on a true story. So I just can't even imagine like the fear that people would have. Like, I fear for it now, and it's not very likely in this country, in the state of, how burial is. But I still, just think like, what if I fell in a hole and, was covered up? Like, how horrific that would be. But here's a family member that's actually, witnessing a loved one. So that's sort of horror.
Well, and if you think about, I cannot remember the girl's name. You would think I remember this. Back in the 90s, the little girl that fell in the hole.
Yes.
In the pipe. Yeah, in the hole. And then
Baby Jessica. Baby Jessica.
Baby Jessica.
That's it. Yes.
I mean, think about that. All the different, from back in history, all the different wells that have been dug, all the, holes that have been out there that have been covered up and grown up over, all the pipes, and baby Jessica. And I mean, baby Jessica had to have gone through the similarities of all this, even though she truly wasn't dead. But she was stuck in a hole and literally buried alive, even though there wasn't anything over her, but she just had no way of getting out. So in the mausoleum thing about with the wife having to try to get out but couldn't, and ended up hanging herself like that. And I just think about those things, about all the different wells that they've found corpses in, or they've found skeletons in, because people have just fallen into them. Nobody was around, and they literally died.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't get out. So it
Coal
doesn't
miners.
even have to go with that.
Coal mines. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My grandfather was a coal miner. And when I was recently talking to my dad, because his father died when my dad was 10. So, he has a very limited, memory of that. But I know that my grandfather died at 49 from, black lung, because he was a coal miner. And my dad was telling me these like horrific stories that his mom told him about other miners who they got stuck, and you could talk to them, but you couldn't get them out, and they were basically left buried alive.
Well, the song John Henry.
Yeah.
I mean, even though it's kind of based on fiction, but it's a mythical fiction, because, coal miners, the guy, they're always one big guy, and the miners in Chile, the 33 miners in Chile that were stuck, and it took them all that long. The thought, I mean, there's different things. That's why I don't have a problem going in caves underground.
Yeah.
I just have a problem with people being underground with me, because I'm like, Keith, I can't get on an elevator with more than 4 or 5 people. But that's because I got stuck on an elevator and almost died, because I fell out of the elevator and on the 5th floor.
Oh, good Lord.
But somebody grabbed me in time before I fell down the shaft. But anyway,
Lord, Jeannie.
otherwise I wouldn't be here. Just like, but yeah, I mean, there's all those different ways, and the people that do coal mining, the people that go underground, those people, I have nothing but respect, because I'm like,
absolutely.
It ain't happening. It ain't happening. You're just good luck. That's all I gotta say.
Oh yeah.
Well, they have my respect too. But see, even to this day, you can be in the dead of winter, and if I'm in the car, the passenger window is down. I have to have the air hitting me. Mom said, as a kid, you were climbing the back seat, begging for me to open the window. I'm like, it's pouring down rain, and she's like, you wouldn't shut up until I opened the window. And she's like, can you calm down? You just calm down.
Yeah, some of that just happens. And the one thing I love about Poe is his ability to draw that out in his readers, no matter what, to have that sneakiness, that he can get to the root of it and pull out people's fears, no matter what they are, no matter where you are, what you're thinking, but you automatically go, dude, really? Thanks.
Yeah.
I was okay until there, but all right.
Yeah. I liked the story about Victorine and Renelle also. And to me, the way he kind of treated her, it kind of, to me, compared to a little bit in the book of Guy and Emily, because once they got married, Guy was so obsessed with being buried alive. He started kind of pushing her away. And, we know there's a lot of more things going on behind the scenes with Emily. Not trying to give anything away, but that story to me is where I feel like Corman pulled that out for the movie. Definitely. And it was a very romantic part. I think Holly mentioned that one.
Yeah, death and romance always gotta go.
The other thing that I thought was interesting,
I was gonna say, wait, like if we're talking about Renelle, like I just want to say that it pisses me off.
Yeah.
I just want to emphasize, like, reading that, I could not read it from a woman's perspective and think about, she is property. Even when she is left for dead, she is still some man's property.
Yeah.
And I was even shocked that in a court, they sort of, oh, okay, yeah, you were dead, but not really. It's okay. Your husband doesn't have any say. Yeah. Just adding that in too reminds you of the time period and women's rights, which,
they didn't have any.
Right.
Didn't exist.
Yeah. Yeah, when teaching it, it's definitely trying to get the kids to understand that, women, what color they are, it never mattered. Women were always property. Were always considered property, even up until the 1950s.
Yeah.
Mhm.
women were considered property. Even after the 14th Amendment added in, finally, but it only even in the 15th Amendment and the 14th Amendment, sorry, not 15th, 14th, they're both. Anyway, it only discusses about men. Still nothing about women, not until the 19th Amendment.
Yeah.
And even then, that's only because women outnumbered men in Wyoming.
Yeah, that's true.
So, but
I also wondered in that too, like, does Renelle have any choice? Like, she's left for dead.
Yeah.
And then former lover, comes, and then she seems like, okay, well, I'll accept you because I can't possibly just live on my own, having been buried, and now I can be independent. So that rubbed me a little wrong too. So I don't know if I would put that in romance. But I might be a little jaded of a human, so.
Well, the one thing about it, it reminds me of, what was the lady that Poe was originally the first one he was in love with, and ended up being his last fiance?
Elmira Royster.
Elmira.
Yeah, because wasn't they were supposed to get together, but then her father made her marry somebody else.
Yeah, and he intercepted all of her letters.
Yeah,
Yep.
so that's kind of what that reminded me of. In
Or all
the
his letters, I
story,
should say. Yeah.
is
Kind
that
of like
she
The
was-
Notebook.
Do what?
It's kind of like the movie The Notebook.
Yeah, exactly. But even the story, he makes note of how she suffered, because she was basically beat down and almost, it was a soul death, in my opinion,
Yeah.
what she was dealing with. And then she didn't care about being buried alive, and it was just a sheer miracle that her lover came and ended up
Right.
finding her. And then it was that part of the romance is what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
But the other part,
Yeah.
because it automatically makes me think of a lot of domestic abuse.
Mm-hmm.
I want to read
Because
a line since you mentioned Elmira, and
Yeah.
this is a letter that it was added, like, actually in my book, because it's about Elmira talking about when her path crossed with Poe once he was married. And she writes, I remember seeing Edgar and his lovely wife very soon after they were married. I met them. I never shall forget my feelings at the time. They were indescribable, almost agonizing. However, in an instant, I remembered that I was a married woman and banished them from me as I would a poisonous reptile.
Mm-hmm.
Man, those people could write.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, they had a lot of passion because they had it all bottled up. They couldn't show it any other way.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't allowed, especially women. I mean, that's just like one of the most famous poems of where George Washington was written by a black slave in Connecticut or New Hampshire, one of the two, I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, she was actually a slave in in the North." And so
Phyllis
she was.
Wheatley?
Yeah, Phyllis Wheatley.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Phyllis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, today is not a good day for me. So names are not working. But yeah, Phyllis Wheatley, and they're like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, she was an actual published poet, and she was black, and she was a slave."
Yeah.
And she actually wrote one of the most famous poems for George Washington for his inauguration. Something Columbia, I can't remember.
Yeah.
Spirit of Columbia, maybe, I don't know.
That's all right.
Anyway, so yeah, and I think that's one of the things that Poe, he plays off of. He shows all different sides, even though there's some instances I get a lot of male chauvinist that he's put in there, but he can't help it. It's the way he was raised. I mean, it's the time period for him.
Yeah, it's the time period. One thing I thought was interesting, it reminded me of some words with the mummy, is bringing back these people like fully with the galvanic battery. And so I just kind of snickered when I read it. I was just like giggling, and I'm like, oh, the mummy, he's back.
Yeah, that brought back some bad news.
But I mean, and Poe loved science, and so I thought that was, he can't get away from some things just because, that's who he is, and he brings all those elements in. Will says only this story was better than the Mummy one.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree. I did like Some Words with the Mummy. Jeannie didn't like it, but I really liked the Premature Burial.
Mm-hmm.
No, where did you get the idea that I didn't like?
We're not going there. We're not going there. We're in the same room tonight, so I can, yeah.
Okay.
Turn back, Carmen.
You
Turn
can
back.
point at me, yeah, that's right. It's all right.
Oh, my goodness.
I understand. It's okay. I will happily own it. I did not like that story, and I will never read it again. But
That's
anyway.
okay. What else? What other thoughts? You know, even like on the different stories at the beginning, and I really did like the way he set this story up, because I think, was it Keith that you mentioned that it felt like it was nonfiction? Was it you or Jeff that mentioned that?
Yeah, I think I said it started
Yes,
like a
yes.
nonfiction article.
Yeah, I did. I liked the way he set this up, and it was a little surprising, not surprising, but not. But I really did like the way he did this, and then it was like, boom, you have the narrator going into his own obsessions and psychology of, you know, being with the tapophobia and everything. So,
Well, nobody said it yet. I'm going to. He also brought the religious aspect into it.
yeah.
Because
Yes,
at the very end, especially when he actually used some of the similarities with that hated story, Words with a Mummy. Yeah, the similarities with I can't even pronounce it, the Arabic one, Ashoda, what was it?
Afrasia.
Yeah, that's it. So yeah, that was exactly the same that was in Words with a Mummy. And so he's got that crossover with the religious basis. And I mean, come on, we always have to think about the burial and all that having a religious basis, because it is based on religion. People getting buried, people getting burned, you know, always had that connotation to it. It had to come from somewhere, you know.
Yeah.
Even in pagan rituals. So it still had, you know, still had religion.
That's true. And then one of my favorite Poe quotes from this story is in here, and it's, the boundaries which divide life from death are at best shadowy and vague. Who shall say where the one ends and where the other begins? And that, I just love that quote.
I do too.
Yeah. And it kind of reminds me, it's not the same, but it's got that same antithesis to it of Jack Kerouac's in On the Road. He says, I'm the west of, like, I'm ending the west of my youth and the east of my future. I can't remember exactly the words, but yeah, so Virginia, you know it. And it just, I don't know, that when I read, you know, and I read it again within the story, just, I don't know, that just kind of jumped out at me, and that's where my brain went. And just because I love those kind of quotes, and I'm, with what I'm teaching right now with my students, we just went over those types of things, and they're like, that's like weird. It's backwards and it doesn't make sense, but it does, because they tie together in the middle. And I'm like, that's exactly right. So it's cute.
The one part about the story was that part that really got to me was the part in the cemetery where that cold hand had gripped him, and the worm. And what ran through my mind when he said the worm was the conquering worm, and I'm like, oh, I remember that movie with Vincent Price. I didn't like it, and then because it was horrible, it was just too much for him, for me at that time. And but I was like, oh, this isn't good. I mean, this is not good whatsoever. And then of course it proceeded along, but that part right there, I'm like, well, he got me. Now I kind of like looking over my shoulder, and of course I've got a cat that jumps in my lap at the same time, so that was fun.
Oh,
it's Poe's spirit in the cat. That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Well, she's a tuxedo. She's a stinking thing.
Yeah, yeah. We have. I'm over at Jeannie's this evening, and her cats are staring at us the entire time, and it's kind of creepy, but we're good with that.
Mine are both female, so they definitely give off the superiority and how dare you not pay attention to me?
Yes. And why,
Yeah.
like, to me, why are you here? You're
Exactly.
invading my space. But anyway.
Yeah.
Yes.
Both of mine are female. They're under my desk.
Okay. Other thoughts?
I do like the framing, like you were saying, and I love that he brings in the personal, where this, the story almost feels like it's in two parts, like these historical burials that have happened where people were alive, and then now I'm going to tell you my story. And in some ways it's a little bit like the found footage and what the Victorians loved, like, here's a real tale, but now we have the guy here and he's going to tell us what happened. And I think that is so it's both exciting, and at the same time I do wonder, where am I supposed to be as the reader? Am I supposed to be sitting in a bar, talking to this guy, or could I end up being like someone who's reading his last words, so you don't exactly know what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Well, another thing too, and during this time period, and this might have helped a lot of people who were buried alive, in my opinion, is because when the camera, or I don't remember what it was called back then, but the camera that was being, put together and more popularized and everything, that one of the things that they would do is they would take their dead relatives and they would dress them up and sit there and they would take pictures with them.
Mm-hmm.
Because you would have all these pictures, and it's like, you don't know if those people are dead or not until you actually read about it. So I was thinking that what if those people weren't actually dead or were in a catatonic state, and then they took a picture and then they buried them alive? How even creepier would that be?
That adds a level of creepiness.
See?
Definitely.
I'm saying Poe needed to add that in the story.
Yeah.
I was just saying, it would add that next level.
If he's a time traveler and hears us, he will go back and write it.
Well, that's one of the things we'll be discussing on my little, Carmen has her on the road thing. Well,
Yes.
I'm going to start my own little thing.
Yes. So tonight ends our season 2,
Yes,
technically, and we always start season 3 in August. And so Jeannie,
September.
September. And so we have created something new for Jeannie to do. I've got
our
on the
YouTube
road,
channel.
and yes, and so
It's
you
Time
need to,
Talk with Jeannie.
yes, Time Talks with Jeannie.
Yeah, so I get to travel back or travel
Yes.
with or talk about Poe and how he's still around.
And think of, who is it? Alistair.
Yeah, Alistair. Well, I don't
From-
remember his last name.
From
Crowley. Alistair Crowley.
Crowley?
yes,
Crowley, yeah.
yes.
Crowley.
Think of him
Yeah,
sitting.
Masterpiece
Yes,
Theater.
from
The Golden Dawn? Yeah.
Yeah, she's
Yeah.
going to be sitting in an armchair, and
With
we
a cardboard cutout of
yes,
Poe behind me.
I just got if Jeannie was going to come over to my house, and then we had to change plans, and so we now have a life-size cardboard cutout of Poe that will be standing
Perfect.
with her. And
Yeah, and he
I
has a
like
raven on his shoulder too, so it's all pretty.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect.
Yes, and so if we can wrangle a cat too, we'll do that.
Oh, I don't have to wrangle them. They'll show up slapping me in the face with a tail or something.
Yes, but we're trying to add to what we do, and more content and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Besides this, I mean, we're gonna, this Poe UnPlugged is very important to us, and we love interacting with you guys, and just it's amazing.
Yeah, put my own crazy spin on Poe.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah, there you go. See?
Any last thoughts? I mean, we can still talk as long as you want to. That just kind of threw in at
I
the
just something
time.
that popped in my head there.
Yeah.
And
Well,
Sharon, go ahead, Keith. Sorry.
Actually, I opened my mouth with nothing to say. I thought I had it on the tip of my tongue, and it just went bye-bye.
That's all right. If you think of it, just say. And I think Jeff was going to say something too.
Well, Sharon, I would love to hear more about your book and your
Yeah.
travels. I've been to Bonaventure Cemetery. Conrad Aiken is buried there too,
Yeah.
and I've been to Poe's grave in downtown Baltimore several times, but whereabouts did you go, and where did your investigations lead you?
19 cemeteries, 5 states plus Washington, D.C., 36 profiles. So, and I'll say, like, it's with the History Press, which they have a fairly strict word count. So my first idea was, I'll go all the way up the coast, all the way to Rhode Island, and, you know, kind of travel everywhere. But I quickly realized that summer traffic, since I live outside of Richmond, 95 going north would just be horrific and unfun. As Virginia is like giving thumbs down, absolutely. So I do plan to, you know, obviously, and I actually lived outside of Boston for a while. So I'm not super fond of New England anyway, just from my time. Sorry, New England. But so southern places. I went to Kentucky, was the furthest. Yeah, sorry. I went to Kentucky, which was the furthest cemetery from me, which I thought was sort of interesting because Louisville, Kentucky from Richmond is 9 hours and Boston is 9.5 from where I am. So I didn't, you know, going west was really impressive.
What?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, like mileage wise, I think it's like
9.
Yeah.
Really?
9. It's like 500 miles from where I live versus I think it's 560 to Louisville and 525 to Boston.
Wow.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, my brain had to think.
Yeah, I'm
no, I
south
guess
of
that would be
you. I'm south
well,
of you.
yeah, no, but I mean,
Yeah.
I was having to
Yeah.
remember
Just
where I
directionally.
am.
because
Yeah.
You would think going west and it being like flatter and, you know, Pennsylvania, and that would just, it would be shorter, but actually it's not, because the states are bigger. That's kind of what the problem is.
Yeah.
The states are wider, where if you go north and that way, the states are smaller,
Yeah,
but there's a lot more
Mhm.
of them. So,
absolutely.
So Amasa Converse was the reverend who married Virginia and Edgar. So I really wanted to see him. And I also wanted to give myself a great excuse to go to Cave Hill, which was my first. I'm a super germaphobe. And during the pandemic, I was so thrilled to be home and hold on to my Clorox wipes that I already owned. And I was just sort of like, haha, welcome to my world. But that was actually my first trip that I took. And I stayed at a boutique hotel where there were no people. And I brought my own food. I even bought like an Orca cooler. And the whole idea was like, I was going to make it, you know, living off the land, not really like with my car. But
She was glamping.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I did, you know, the boutique hotel did have like a little microwave and a refrigerator, so it wasn't that bad. But you know, my vacation was going back and forth to Cave Hill. I stayed, I think it was like a half a mile from there. And, you know, I think when they asked, you know, like you check in and they text you how things are going. And I'm just like, oh, it's great, you know, hanging out at the cemetery. It's a good time. But that one was really impressive. And I went down to Charleston, South Carolina, which was not so Magnolia is beautiful, but I'm super afraid of alligators. And there's the sign when you first go in that warns you South Carolina law prohibits the feeding of alligators. So I was super freaked out the entire time, and I didn't want to stray too far from my car thinking, well, this won't work out for me very well. But the city cemeteries were amazing, and I got caught in the rain there, in Circular Cemetery. So I actually took a video and I had posted it. I run a group, River City Cemeterians, before the pandemic. We did more tours and meetups together, and I do tour guiding for Hollywood Cemetery and Chaco Hill Cemetery.
Oh.
But I posted there, I was like, don't send help, you know, like I'm stuck with these like large old trees and it's pouring and it's magical. And it was a great time. but I originally started, it was banter with my academic dean at the time, who's now our provost. And, she's from Baltimore. So she was, giving me a hard time because I had the English department, I'm the coordinator for the major minor program. And we had our meeting on Poe's birthday. So I asked everybody, bring a toast for Poe. And we were chatting about it. And then the dean was just like, well, you know what? He's not Virginian. And I was like, Poe said he was a Virginian. I didn't say it. Poe said it. And she was just giving me a hard time. And at that point, I was just thinking, like, that would be fun. Let me look into other cemeteries instead of just Shockoe Hill, and let me find out all the connections. I found more people in Shockoe Hill and Richmond. And I even do the tour there. But yeah, I had a lot of fun. Baltimore was a good time. I broke my finger because I'm always telling bad stuff about, I'm always like, don't go to Baltimore. And it's a bad joke, but I actually love Baltimore. And I will say that I think Baltimore loves Poe more than Richmond. And those are some fighting words, but really,
It's true.
yeah, it's so like, I don't get it. Like, what's wrong with us? But we have a great museum that does great things, but
It's
so, so when I traveled around, just to kind of go back to the idea of the book, I not only wanted to, find out their connection to Poe, but I wanted to have my own connection with the people. And with the podcast, like, I actually had Virginia smell me because I was wearing orris root. And
I can't get it out of my brain. I'm like I've got to get some. That I just want to smell it all the time. It was amazing. I was like oh my gosh,
that was what Poe's foster mother Frances Allen wore.
Frances wore it,
and he remembered the smell of it, and he talked about it. And as he was older, he still remembered that. So I wanted to connect in that way. And I also, because I did do work in Shockoe Hill Cemetery before, I wanted to plant, in the cemetery where, to Helen, Jane Stannard is buried there. Someone had planted violets when the plaque was put down. And, that's, violets are a fussy little plant, and it's like they're not there. So we added some, and just added plants to the cradle graves and whatnot. So I wanted to have that experience where I was both telling the story of Poe and telling the story of the people. And I just became so infatuated with these individuals. Both they could write so well, their letters were lovely, and they just, when they talk about Poe, like, you can just feel that charisma, that he was like magic, like when he came out and read poetry. And so it was a really good time. And I did, I share kind of parts in the book, like not only what I call Life Before the Stone, which was actually my husband's very great title for that section, which was like, instead of bio, but before they're in the grave, which is really what I wanted to talk about. But I did like my own sort of grave reflections where I connected, when I was there, what I did. And, did I sit and have like a drink where someone was known to sit and have a drink? And did I listen? So I had, my phone because I didn't have Poe, but so I listened to poetry in some places. I read poetry in other places, and just really tried to connect to the people as much as possible. It was great. So much fun.
Yeah.
Congratulations on your book.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely read it. If you, check it out and read it. I really enjoyed it. I know Jeannie enjoyed it. And the interview we had with Sharon was fantastic. So
it really was.
Yes. What'd you say, Sharon?
I said I'm chatty. So.
Oh, it's all good. We generally, like Poe Unplugged, we don't split up, but when we have interviews that are an hour, we always split it in 2 parts, because we always try to think of people that are driving somewhere under 30, 45 minutes. You can kind of like hear that you're going on your way to work, part 1, on the way home, part 2. So
yeah. And I mean, it was a great interview because we got to discuss a lot of different things with how she put it together, where she went through. What was the bookshop? Is it bookshop.com? I think is what you shared with us.
.org. Bookshop.
.org. Yeah. About how you can order her book, and it helps the smaller bookstores instead of going through like Amazon or places like that. So that was really good.
And you can pick your locale. It doesn't have to be one of my local bookstores, but you can put in your city and state and choose wherever.
Yeah, and I typed that in the chat just if anybody had needed that. So
yes, History Press, isn't it? History Press. You can go through that, but I just like the idea of being able to support the local bookstores because a lot of them, I mean, we lost orders. Books A Million is on its last legs. Ooh, there's the book right there. It was awesome.
Well, I was just asked, what's the other book? This was by women writers buried in Virginia.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we'll ask that.
And so this is my baby because so I've gotten so much attention about the Poe book, and I'm really, really delighted, but it's because people love Poe. But no one, I won't swear, loves women writers who were in Virginia. No one, it's the ongoing struggle with, like, I love teaching women's literature and finding a voice for people. So today I got really excited because Old City Cemetery in Lynchburg, Virginia just asked me to sell books for women writers this October because they have they have like a candlelight tour where, I mean, they go on sale early September, and within minutes the tours are sold out. But what they do is they do profiles of the people who were buried in the cemetery. So not necessarily famous, but they have historic interpretations of each individual. So they have actors, and you go around, and one of them is Lizzie Chambers Hall, who was one of the writers, poets, who's buried there, and she's going to be one of the profiles. So I got really nerdy and was just like, oh, I have to, go on this tour. And they were like, well, you want to sell books? And I'm like, yeah. That would be awesome. So, and then she also said, hey, can you bring the Poe book too? Because I think I'll buy that. And I was like, wah, wah. But thank you for asking. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
Mount Olivet Cemetery here in Nashville does that too. They have people dress as the residents of the cemetery and tell their stories.
That's so cool.
I've been, and it is amazing. Yeah, it is amazing. I like just going out to that cemetery because it's beautiful. It's got so many different cool things. And last time I was there, my husband and I were dressed as Morticia and Gomez, and we took pictures out there. It's on my cover of my actual personal Facebook.
Oh, okay.
And I just love that.
In the 1960s, my grandfather was superintendent of the Nashville City Cemetery.
Oh, cool.
Another historic cemetery near downtown. Governors of Tennessee are buried there. Some of the Fisk Jubilee singers. Captain William Driver, who nicknamed the American flag Old Glory. Wow. So I remember as a boy going out, to see my grandfather and playing in the cemetery, always in the daytime. But so yeah, I spent time in cemeteries in my youth also.
Yeah.
My grandfather was a genealogist. So, I kind of, during the podcast, I talked about growing up, that was the one time where you could be with family and nobody was bickering because you're in the cemetery. You have to act a certain way. But I also got to run around outdoors and find relatives, Yeah. That was cool. But I did, like, when you said, during the daytime, I was a Girl Scout. So I remember being like, brownie, like little age. And our meetings were in this, a church, like a old Southern church in the middle of New Kent County, which does not have street lights and didn't have any stoplights when I was a kid, but now it does, like 2. And they had, there was a graveyard in the back. And so we used to play like Red Rover and everything in the front yard, waiting for people, their parents to come pick them up and whatnot. But I just remember like always sort of peeping back into the graveyard and thinking it was so spooky. And not too long ago, I went and just like walked around during the day, and it was really cool. Like I was just, sort of thanking the cemetery for being, its own character in some ways. Like it shaped me. So
yeah, that is awesome. Yeah, my father's side of the family has a family cemetery in Independence, Missouri. And I know I went one time, bless you, as a child, and I remember going into it, but we didn't stay very long. My grandmother was showing us some of our relatives and things. And I want to go back. I just haven't been back to Missouri in a while. And but I was so fascinated when I found out my family has their own cemetery. This is the coolest thing ever. But I'm like, I need to go up there and go back, because I think it would be really cool. Because I've and great aunt of mine, she was actually married into the family, did our ancestry back in like the 70s and 80s, traced it back to Ireland. And yeah, and so I have it. My mother gave it to me before she died, because she was like, you're the only one that's going to appreciate this family history. Other relatives have it too, but so I'm the keeper of the information, I guess. And so I've gone through it multiple times, and I'm like, it's really cool.
Yeah.
It's really neat.
There's something special about like my family's immigrants from Poland. So, most of my family's in another country, but there is something special when you're in a cemetery and you find your people.
Yeah.
That's just the coolest thing. And I met my paternal grandfather in the cemetery, and I learned, and this was maybe like 10 years ago. I'm sure we went as kids, but I probably wasn't, paying attention because there was so much to do. I had cousins in, Pennsylvania, and that, it was a lot of fun. But I just remember like hearing my dad, and he, was talking to his dad, and he called him Pop. And so my dad's, he's from, the mountains of Pennsylvania. So I have this northern dad, and raised in the South with a Southern mom. And I was just like, whoa, like I call you, dad or daddy, like maybe I was supposed to call you Pop. Like, and it was just sort of like, whatever, I mean, at that point it had, was obviously too long, but one of those things you learn about your family in the cemetery.
Yeah.
Sometimes those stories that you would never hear are told in the cemetery. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, the sad thing about my family is that there's not a lot I could trace back to a lot of cemeteries, because my family was not literate enough, and they were very poor. So a lot of the tombstones and a lot of the records, there's nothing to find. Like one side of my family, I can't trace back farther than 1834. So it's like completely all the records are gone. Yeah. And a lot of the stuff I can't find is because the misspellings. And Sharon and I, we all talked about that. And this all comes back to where most of the names were spelled phonetically because of the illiteracy of the family members. And so, you're tracing and you're like, well, wait a minute, was this the right one? And even the census records or the death records or, those kinds of things. I didn't even know that my mother, when she died, had been spelling her name different from her actual birth certificate all her life.
Wow.
And it was like, so I actually, on the death certificate, I put it to match the birth certificate, but on her tombstone, I put it to match what she went by in life. So, and that's the thing. I mean, a lot of that happens, especially in mountain families like mine, where there's a lot of, we've talked about this, I think, before. My family family name Wood, Smith, Russell, Williamson. I'm like, you're talking about the most generic and the ones that have changed so much because most of the names depend on what they did when they came to the New World. It had nothing to do with family.
Yeah.
Williamson is the only one because it's son of William, but it's like, which William? Okay.
Which William?
Is it the Scottish,
conqueror,
the Irish?
conqueror.
Exactly. Are we talking Scottish, Irish, Roman? Who knows? But and that's the thing, and that's one of the things I love about when I love listening to people who can actually go back and trace their family and have that tie, because it's like some of it I really wish, because my family was so old. I was like born to an older family, and so most of them were so old and had died off by the time I got to ask questions.
And that's what stinks.
Yeah. And Sharon, the thing with Pop, my brother actually always called my grandfather Pop and my dad.
Mhm.
So, and that was the thing. It was like I never knew there was a difference, Pop, Dad, Daddy, Grandpa, Papa,
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's a mountain thing or what. But.
Yeah.
Well, my mom's grandfather, right? My mom's grandfather, so my great grandfather, he was Papa in the South. So it, like I grew up saying aunt and aunt, just depending on which family member I was talking to. Envelope. I code switch all the time and didn't even realize it. But that was like, it was like that moment where I can't, I don't have children and I don't like them anyway, but that's fine. But if I were, I just imagine like, the thoughts that go through your head, like, would you want to call me like mommy or mama or mom? Like I call my mom like mama. It's not even mama, it's like mummy, like I guess. But it just, so we can get some, real Tidewater Virginia sound going when it's the two of us. And so I say, like, when my dad answers the phone, I would say, hi Dad, may I speak with Mom please? And when my mom would answer the phone, I'd say, hey Mama, can I speak to Daddy? Just like one word, and
right. Well, it's just like I asked my sister-in-law, I said, where in the world did you get Gigi from? Because she didn't want to be called grandma, Granny or anything. She wanted to be Gigi, and I'm going, what are you?
Like, well, I think a lot of people now do different things, so it's not grandma.
Well, the thing about it is, every time I think of Gigi, I think of a dog. Isn't that like a dog name?
I think of Gigi the musical.
Gigi? Yeah.
I'm like Fido or something.
Well, and
musical. My niece is Gigi.
Let's see. Will says my ancestors have their own little cemetery in Ireland, and I went there with my dad back in 2011. Only Ruddocks are buried there, and we did a little maintenance in a heavy rainstorm. Definitely felt their presence. That is really cool.
Awesome. Yeah,
that is really cool. And then let's see. Sharon shared her last name and what it means. That's really neat. Out of the land of spiders, Goth Street cred.
Hey,
yeah, Leslie Caron. Yeah.
Right.
Let me share what
Best
Smith
picture of 1958.
Oh, okay. I forgot when it had come out because it was Leslie Caron. Yeah. I'm thinking of Gypsy with Natalie Wood.
Oh, and let us not forget adding an S to things. Like half my family adds an S to the Wood, and it's Wood or Woods. And then Smith is with a Y or an I, and it's like, okay, am I Smythe? Am I Smith? I'm on what? Yeah. So figure it out, people. Come on.
Well, any other thoughts? Any other last minute thoughts before we close out the evening?
Just Will, you're awesome. I hope you can come back and talk and everything.
Yes. And
yeah, same here, Will.
Yeah, Will, we're still gonna, I'm gonna still send you the email. That way, if you can jump on, please do, because you've added a lot to this, and it's been great having you on here. So I hope I'm able to attend next month. Yeah, that would be great.
And good luck.
Thank you all.
Yes, good luck.
Yeah, good luck, Will.
So next month, we are doing Never Bet the Devil Your Head. So, and then do what?
Or
So
anything
excited.
else.
Yeah, or yeah, Never
Yeah.
Bet the Devil Anything Else as well. So that's what we'll be reading, and I think that's going to be a cool one to do. I've read it once; it's been a while, so.
And who's our special guest star?
I don't know if
Special
I
guest.
don't know if we're going to have a special guest
Okay.
because
Yeah,
that's still up in the air, and that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
we're gonna
We
try
are your
to-
special guests.
Yes, you are all our special
With a
guests.
collective
Yeah.
we.
You all are special.
Yes.
And we're special.
Yes.
too, so we're all-
Yes.
And Sharon, I hope you join us again as well.
Yes.
We've loved having you be our Gothic guest this month.
Yes.
And I'm just going to go ahead and say this. For October, our Gothic guest is someone that is with us this evening, and that is Micah.
Yes.
Yay!
Yeah.
So for
Cool.
like almost 2 decades, or yeah, right at 2 decades, he has done a very cool event out in California called Night of the Raven. And so we want to celebrate him. And so I've been in contact with him about he's going to choose what we're reading for October.
Mhm.
So we're not 100% sure yet, just because we haven't totally finished talking
Solidified
about it.
that,
Yeah.
yes.
So, and then let's see, November, we have a treat. We're just going to go ahead and share it with you real quick. Let's see. Let's see. We'll ask Micah where in California. I think it's the Los Angeles area. I know Micah's driving, so I'm not sure if he can type
Tell
right
us
now.
tonight, yeah.
But in November, we're going to have the director of education from the Hermitage, Andrew Jackson's home, come on with us. And we're going to do King Pest, which has an Andrew Jackson character in it. So she's going to be able to fill in a lot of things about the time of Andrew Jackson while Poe was alive. And so we're excited about that. And then December, we have not chosen what we're reading yet, but Mark DeWidziak, Jeff, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes,
Okay,
Mark
and
Widziak.
Yes, and he wrote a book about Poe, Life and Death. I think it's The Life and Death of Edgar Allan Poe. And so he's going to join us as well and be our Gothic guest for December. And so we're trying to like line people up way down the road, and it's exciting.
Mhm.
And then there's something that we can't share
No.
100%, but in first part of October, we're doing a special event with someone else, and you're going to hear about it probably end of the week?
Yeah. I think it's right after Labor Day. Next Tuesday.
Yeah. We're
gonna
gonna
start the advertisement.
Yes.
So.
And so it's going to be, I'm just going to go ahead and say it's going to be a whole day of Poe fun.
Yep.
So
it's going to be a live event.
Yes, a live event on YouTube. And so again, next week you will find out.
Check social media. You'll see it on social media, on emails, on the
newsletter, everything. So.
And then of course Poe International Fest is next.
October 7th.
I keep wanting to say next month, and I'm like, no, we haven't even ended.
Close enough.
Yes.
September 1st is Friday, Jeannie.
I know.
And I know, Holly, you're going to be there.
We
Virginia,
have like 5 weeks.
Yeah,
we have 5 weeks.
Virginia, you're coming, aren't you?
Oh yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yes, yay. So, and that's in Baltimore at his house in Poe Park, and I've been every year, even the virtual year, and just it's amazing. You're immersed in Poe, and it's like you still can't get enough of it.
Yep.
Let's see. And then Will says, cool. I met someone a while back who does something similar with Poe at San Jose State. Oh, cool. Yeah. Okay.
That's cool.
All right.
So, it's going to be busy. I mean, busy.
Yeah. Oh, and Micah said, chats were 30 minutes from the Magic Castle in Hollywood. I just arrived. So
there you go.
Yeah.
So anybody happen to be in California, check him out.
Yes. Yeah. And my husband and I will be in California October 13th to the 16th, but that's not when his event is. So that's a whole nother thing we do, and that's all tiki. So very lighthearted compared to Poe. So, and then Holly says, thanks, Sharon. I look forward to getting your book. So, all right, guys. Well,
Yeah, I already told my husband after the podcast. I was like, "There's this book, and we can go around to all the different graves and use that like our God said in your podcast." I can't wait. That's going to be our next little thing. Very cool.
Yeah, I do. I want to take the book and like go visit everywhere and just go find everything. So.
And someone did that last week. They sent me like a Facebook message and they said, do you have the coordinates to this grave? And I was like, yeah, hang on a second. Let me just drop it in.
Oh, that is so cool.
That's
so
hysterical.
cool.
Yeah, definitely be in touch. Like I can help you out. And I created like a find a grave virtual cemetery. So that kind of helps, like, navigate too. So.
Oh, absolutely.
Google Earth.
Well,
Yes.
everybody, thank you so much for being a part of tonight's adventure. And we really look forward to next month with the devil.
That's right. Devil in the details.
Yes.
Oh, wait a minute. That's the wrong one.
Yeah, but that's okay. Yeah.
Devil's always in the details.
But yeah, everybody have a fantastic
Yep.
night.
Yep.
And yeah. So thank you guys.
Catch you on the flip side.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.